The million-dollar question as we enter the final week of the regular season is who will be playing for the Big 12 title. With over half the conference still in the hunt, we go through the standings, tiebreakers, and what you can expect in Week 14. All that and so much more coming up right now on Inside the 12. Hello and welcome into Inside the 12. I'm Madison Hock alongside Pete Sousa. The last week of the regular season is here. We've been saying it all season long. The Big 12 is the deepest conference in college football when it comes to parity. And entering Week 14, get this, 9 programs, yes, 9 programs remain in the hunt for a berth to the Big 12 football championship game. You cannot write a script better than that, Pete.
No, you can't. If a screenwriter turned this into a Hollywood production company, they'd probably say, take it back, make it a little more realistic.
Well, it's a movie I want to keep watching.
Yes.
And now as we enter the final week of the regular season, it's all coming down to the wire. We're going to know soon which 2 teams will face off in the 2024 Dr. Pepper Big 12 Championship game that's going to be played on December 7th at AT&T Stadium. As a reminder, you can get your tickets right now at SeatGeek.com. Let's go ahead and take a look at the updated Big 12 standings, and things are pretty crazy here, Pete. Take a look at those top 4 teams. They're sitting at 6-2 in conference play, but 5 others right behind them in the hunt at 5-3.
All 9 teams still technically in the hunt, though it would take a lot more chaos than normal for some of them to make it. Last week, BYU and Colorado controlled their own destiny. Now it's flipped. Arizona State and Iowa State are the top dogs with, let's call it, the cleanest path to the title game.
The name of the game this week is tiebreakers, and a lot of them. For the sake of simplicity and time, let's discuss those top 4 teams, all starting with Arizona State. Over the last 2 weeks, BYU has shown just how vulnerable they can be, and Arizona State capitalized on the Cougars' weaknesses on Saturday. The Sun Devils finished the game with 413 total yards of offense, in large part thanks to running back Cam Scattaboo, who rushed for 147 yards and 3 touchdowns. Arizona State also picked off BYU twice, and now, Pete, their championship hopes are still very much alive.
Yeah, it has been an incredible turnaround at Arizona State. Cam Scattaboo, you mentioned it. It's like every time he hits somebody, he gets more energy. The yards after conference, amazing, or after contact. The team was picked to finish last in the conference. Now they're in the driver's seat. Amazing scenario. They've got it done throughout the season. Now they just need to beat their rival, Arizona, which is, that's a tough task. Huge state rivalry game. There is one nightmare scenario that can send the Sun Devils packing, even with the win. BYU loses, and there is a 3-team tie between the top teams, then a Texas Tech win paired with both Baylor beating Kansas and Cincinnati beating TCU. That would have Arizona State missing the title game due to tiebreakers. We don't think that's going to happen, but it's possible.
We told you it was going to get really crazy, and here we are, the last week of the regular season. Chaos. It has been an incredible turnaround by Coach Kenny Dillingham and Arizona State. Last year, they won 3 games in his first year as head coach. This year, 6-0 at home and 9-3 overall. Moving on, Pete, let's turn to the team they beat last week in BYU. It was an impressive start for the Cougars, starting out at 9-0. However, they have lost back-to-back games to Kansas and Arizona State last weekend. What does BYU have to do to be playing on December 7th in Arlington?
It is bittersweet. They're a couple yards from an undefeated season right now, but they're not out. They need Arizona State or Iowa State to lose. Remember, Iowa State's playing Kansas State. That's a tough game. If it happens, they go into their game versus Houston Saturday night in Provo, knowing if they win, they are in. A ton on the line for BYU.
Speaking of Iowa State, welcome back. It's good to see you again. After getting off to the best start in program history, the Cyclones had some bumps in the road there, dropping games to Texas Tech and Kansas. However, they quickly got back on track and had a gutsy win over Utah last Saturday because of Rocco Beck. You know that name. He threw for over 250 yards, and after the game said this is exactly what a team wants at the end of November. Meaningful games and everything to play for. Pete, what is Iowa State's path to the Big 12 championship game?
Well, the Cyclones, they are now in a position where essentially it's win and you're in. There's nothing sweeter than that. Like Rocco Beck said, that's not the easiest thing to do with a really good Kansas State team waiting for them in Farmageddon. Much like Arizona State, there is one 3-team tie scenario where winning that game won't be good enough. If BYU loses and Texas Tech beats West Virginia, then a win by Kansas or TCU will send Iowa State home due to tiebreakers.
Wow. And lastly, Colorado. If the Buffaloes were to play for the title game, they need a win and a lot of help. What all needs to happen for the Buffaloes?
Well, for Colorado, you have to beat Oklahoma State, right? A very doable task this season. You got to do it at home. That's going to be on Black Friday. Then you play the waiting game. You need 2 of those other 3 teams to lose. Or if it comes down to one of those crazy 3-team scenarios we talked about, we will see the Buffaloes in Arlington.
So to sum it all up, if all 4 of these top teams win, it will be Arizona State versus Iowa State. If only 2 of the 4 win, those 2 will play for the title.
And look, according to the Big 12, and you were texting me about this yesterday, it kind of makes your head go crazy, 250 possible scenarios that could play out among these 9 teams that are officially in the hunt. So Kansas State and Baylor, you still actually have a chance, but you're going to need a lot of help.
I was like, am I reading that right? 250 different scenarios. But right now, the coaches are just telling their players, just win this week. Let the rest play out itself. Definitely shaping up to be an epic final week in the Big 12 Conference. So shifting gears now, the college football playoff rankings were released Tuesday night. And Pete, every week, Old Trapper Beef Jerky asks, what's your beef? And I know you have some beef after the rankings.
We joke a little bit, but justifiably, yeah. I had a beef with the rankings when they first came out earlier in the season, and here we go again. It seems like the committee continues to value name recognition and past performance over actual performance. 5 Big 12 teams are in the latest top 25, but I want to focus on Arizona State. The Sun Devils come in at 16th in the country. They're 9-2 with 3 top 25 wins this season. They're directly behind 2 3-loss SEC teams with fewer ranked wins. Also, they're behind a 2-loss Clemson team. They only have 1 team that they've beat with a winning record this season. Then number 11, Boise State, the Boise State argument. They have the 81st ranked strength of schedule in the country. And a similar opponent, Arizona State blasted Wyoming earlier in the season. Boise State barely beat them last week. To the committee, I ask, leave the bias at the door and put respect on the teams who are earning their shot at the playoffs.
Hey, no argument from me. I hear you on that. While Pete is going to cool off, we're going to take a quick break here on Inside the 12, but we're just getting started. Coming up, Kansas heads to Waco with bowl eligibility on the line. Can Baylor slow down Devin Neal? That matchup and more we're going to preview when we return on Inside the 12. Welcome back to Inside the 12. Madison Hock here with Pete Sousa. The final week of the regular season is here. It's hard to believe. We have a packed schedule. Every team is playing this weekend. A lot is on the line when it comes to championship stakes that's going to be played December 7th in Arlington. So let's just jump right in, starting with Utah heading to Orlando this Friday to face the UCF Knights at 8 o'clock on Fox. Pete, what are you watching for in this game?
Well, this is something you'll only see in the Big 12. Speaking of the depth of the conference, both teams are 4-7, but the Utes have one of the best defenses in the country. And as far as UCF is concerned, R.J. Harvey, one of the best running backs in the nation. Will the senior give fans one more to remember against that Utah squad, ranked 3rd in total defense? We'll find out.
Moving on, 2 bowl-bound teams look to finish strong as West Virginia takes on Texas Tech Saturday at noon. If you like the run game and that's your MO when it comes to your offense, well, this is going to be a fun game, Pete.
Well, we're all going to want to run off the turkey, right? These guys are going to be running wild. West Virginia 4th in the conference, averaging nearly 200 yards a game with their 3-headed attack. Meanwhile, Taj Brooks is going to Taj Brooks, right? Over 1,300 yards all by himself. This game will come down to the trenches. Which team can slow down the other?
Running off turkey, running off sweet potato casserole. Cincinnati looks to pick up their 6th win of the season versus a TCU team that can air it out with the best of them. What are you watching for in this?
Josh Hoover, 6th in the country in passing yards. Cincinnati wants to go bowling. They need linebacker Jared Barrett and company to put the pressure on Hoover. The problem is Brendan Sorsby has really had trouble moving the football and scoring. I like TCU.
On Friday, Colorado takes on an Oklahoma State team with nothing to lose in a game where the stakes could not be any higher if you're Colorado. What has to happen for the Buffaloes to get the win on Saturday?
Well, this is more of an issue for Colorado than the 17-point spread would suggest. As far as Colorado, they gave up 331 yards running last week against Devin Neal. And, oh, by the way, Ollie Gordon won the Doak Walker last year. They will be featuring him, Oklahoma State will, in this ball game. He ran for 160 yards last week. A problem for Colorado. Gary Barnett, former Colorado coach and Northwestern coach, I heard him say recently they haven't been tackling the way that they did at one part of the season. They had gotten better, were hitting guys, wrapping them and dropping them. Now, as we saw against Kansas, too much arm tackling. They need to get better fundamentally on defense because obviously the talent's there. They lead the conference in sacks.
Well, two guys who aren't easy to tackle, Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter. How do you slow down Buffalo's offense?
I don't think you do. Shedeur Sanders last week had completion streaks of 9 and 11, only threw 3 incompletions in the first 3 quarters, ended up with 3 touchdowns, no picks. Travis Hunter is Travis Hunter. Keep it simple. If you can't run the football, throw the short passes, make the passing game become the running game.
And remember, Colorado needs a win and 2 losses from the top 3 teams in order to make it to the Big 12 title game. Next up, Kansas versus Baylor. These teams have won 9 of their last 10 combined, and the only loss was a 2-point heartbreaker. Kansas losing against Kansas State. What's got Baylor so hot down the stretch of this regular season?
Bryson Washington. I mean, he's had 626 yards in his team's last 5 games. In his team's first 5, he had 186. That comes down to the quarterback change. Early in the season, they switched from DeQuan Finn, a running quarterback, to Sawyer Robertson, someone who can pass the ball more. A lot of folks close to the program think this enabled Baylor to establish running backs like Bryson Washington.
Meanwhile, Kansas is the first team in college football to beat 3 straight ranked teams while having a losing record. They are now 1 win away from bowl eligibility as well. How can they get it done?
Well, they're going to have to get it done on the ground with Devin Neal, but Baylor's going to try to stop that, right, and make Jalen Daniels beat them. Interesting wrinkle to this game. Offensive coordinator for Kansas, Jeff Grimes, he spent many years working for Dave Aranda at Baylor. They had great success, went to the Sugar Bowl and won it. I think we will get the best out of Jeff Grimes this week, regardless of what he says about this just being another game.
I can't wait for this one. 2 teams that are playing their best football down the stretch of the regular season. More to come on Inside the 12, including a rivalry showdown in Ames as Iowa State looks to keep their title hopes alive versus Kansas State. That's coming up when we come back. Welcome back to Inside the 12. We have 3 more games with Big 12 title implications on the line. That is hard to believe. We begin with Arizona State at Arizona and the battle for the Territorial Cup. In rivalry games, they say you throw out the records, but these Sun Devils are on a mission right now. How do they get one step closer to the Big 12 title game?
Well, Jordan Tyson has been the key, really. I mean, he's got 36 catches for almost 500 yards over his last 4 games. And when he's not hitting, it's been Cam Scatterbo banging his way to yards after contact. One thing Sam Levitt needs to be careful of this week, Arizona does a great job with their zone blitzes, dropping defensive linemen in coverage. They could fool him a few times, and they have the firepower on offense in a rivalry game to keep this close. Sun Devils got to limit turnovers.
Absolutely, and their offense is rolling right now as well, as you pointed out. It has been a tough year for the Wildcats, though, who came into the season with really high hopes. What went wrong?
Well, defense for them has been a problem all year long, and we haven't seen the play from Noah Fafita that we had hoped for, right? Brett Brennan and his team, I can't believe we're not talking about them in a bowl game. Well, for the Wildcats, look for Tet McMillan to have a huge game. I love how he was asked after their last game, a loss, said, hey, are you going to play in your last game of the season? You're an NFL draft prospect. He said, of course. It's a rivalry game. I'm going to be there. Expect to get the best from Arizona.
I love that mindset. For Arizona State, while things can get crazy, as a reminder, if they win this game, they're in the best position to make the Big 12 title game. So right now for the Sun Devils, it is just get a win. Next up, Houston at BYU. The Cougars season was perfect, but that has come and gone. But a trip to Arlington, not really too far out of reach now. What do they need to do, BYU, on Saturday to get the win?
They need to establish the run and get ahead early. Out of the locker room when they were trailing against Arizona State, they put together 3 scoring drives, and all of those drives, the first one was 95 yards, methodical, slow, melting the clock, beat up that talented Houston defense. Houston can play good man-to-man defense. They have good corners, and that allows them to get after Retzlaff with the blitz. We've seen recently, right, especially in those last 2 losses, get Retzlaff off of his mark, hit him, rattle him. When he's out of rhythm, the entire Cougar team becomes out of rhythm.
Even with a win versus Houston, BYU is going to need some help on Saturday. They need either Arizona State or Iowa State to lose for the Cougars to make the trip to Arlington. Finally, it is time now for our Game of the Week presented by Children's Health. We've been talking about this game all season long. It's been circled on the calendar. Kansas State versus Iowa State. Farmageddon in Ames with everything on the line. How does Kansas State get the big upset?
They do it running the ball, and they did it so well running the football last week. We talked about that Chris Kleiman and the offense was going to need to get back to the running game, specifically for Avery Johnson. 10 rushes for Avery Johnson for 81 yards. And you can't forget in a game like this about a guy like DJ Giddens. 6'1", 212, one of the best running backs in the country. Look for a steady diet of him. Something cool that's going on with Kansas State. Offensive coordinator Connor Riley was up in the press box calling plays early in the season. He coaches the offensive line. Chris Kleiman brought him back down to the sidelines last game. Avery Johnson said the whole team felt the energy of having their O-line coach, also offensive coordinator, back on the sidelines. Look for that to keep it going. I like this running attack for Kansas State.
Good momentum there for Iowa State. And Iowa State does have to win this game for any shot at making it to the Big 12 title game. They are one of the teams that are completely in control of their own destiny, though. What do they need to do to get the win and control their own destiny? Well,
they need to move the football on offense, right? And they need to continue to do what they have been doing, which is keeping defenses on their heels. Against Utah, the Utes didn't know if it was going to be a wildcat formation, if it was going to be a halfback pass, or if Rocco Becht was going to have the opportunity to beat them deep. Iowa State found ways to do all of those things. Bad news for Kansas State. Not only are you facing a formidable offense this week, but you also got to get ready for the bag of tricks, right, that we could see from Iowa State's offense.
Not only would a win put Iowa State in the title game, but it would give the Cyclones their first ever 10-win season. It is the final week of the regular season. There's plenty of action across the Big 12 this weekend. We have to take a quick break, but when we return, National College Football reporter Shahan Jayaraja joins the show to help pick this week's games. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Inside the 12. Before we jump into this week's picks, a quick look back at how we did last week. We can just freeze this for the rest of the show, I think. Take a look at that, Pete. 7-1. I think that's the best week anyone's had on the show so far. Am I right?
Yeah, and I also think a broken clock is right twice a day. So here we go.
Okay, you got me on that. All right, moving on to the last week of the regular season. Joining us this week is a national college football writer for CBS Sports and a graduate of Baylor University, just right down the road, Shahan Jayaraja. Shahan, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
So good to have you, man. I know the Big 12 is your sweet spot, and we're ready to get into it with you.
All right, let's dive right in. We're going to start with two games coming up on Black Friday. Oklahoma State versus Colorado, 12 p.m. Eastern on ABC. Who do you have in this one?
Yeah, this is a tough matchup for Oklahoma State. Colorado, I think, is just going to be able to get behind them. You obviously have seen this Oklahoma State defense struggle so much at times, and this is a bad team to struggle on defense against. So I think that Colorado takes this one.
Yeah, I like the Buffaloes, too, going away.
Yeah, I can't argue that. Colorado for me as well. And then Utah versus UCF kicks off at 8 o'clock Eastern on Fox. Who are you taking in this one?
This one's a really tough one because I think it's going to come down to sort of game script. I do think, though, that when you look at UCF right now, they've found something, I think, with some of their quarterback changes. And I think this will be kind of a final parting shot for them. And I think they take this win.
Yeah, I think KJ Henry gets it done against Utah. And Shahan mentioned the passing game. It's a real good look for UCF.
Yeah, I like UCF in this one, so we're all agreeing so far. Moving on to Saturday's game, starting with West Virginia versus Texas Tech. Kickoff for that one's at noon Eastern on FS1. Who are you picking in this one?
This one's also a really tough one, but I think that Texas Tech has really come together near the end of the year. I think especially with Taj Brooks, this is going to be his last regular season game. I don't think he's going to lose it.
Yeah, I agree. We saw the way Devin Neal went out at home in his last game against Colorado. I think the same thing for Taj Brooks. I like Texas Tech.
Yeah, I like Texas Tech as well. Pete all season has been big on Taj Brooks, and I'm going to have to agree with that as well. Moving on, Kansas versus Baylor, your alma mater. 12 o'clock Eastern kickoff for this one on ESPN2. Who you taking in this one?
Yeah, some are calling this the battle for the best team in the Big 12 right now, but it's going to be a really competitive one. I think I like Kansas in this one. They're just rolling so much on both sides of the ball right now. I think that their defense is kind of the thing that makes the difference, but it's going to be a close one. It's going to come down to the wire.
I like Baylor because I feel like Kansas, they have nothing to lose. Kansas has gone up against opponents who've been tightly wound the past few weeks because there's been so much on the line. I like Baylor in this.
And that's why I like Kansas. I just feel like Kansas is rolling with all the momentum right now, so I got to go with Kansas. Arizona State versus Arizona. This is always a fun rivalry game. 3:30 Eastern on Fox. Who you taking in this one?
Yeah, this is kind of the opposite of what I thought this game would be coming into the year. Definitely an upset opportunity that can shake up the Big 12 race. I think that Arizona State is just a much more complete team right now, but don't count out the idea of Tetsuya McMillan having a legendary game in what should probably be his final Arizona game.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's going to be a tough game for Arizona State because it's such a tough rivalry game, but I like Arizona State.
I like Arizona State as well. TCU versus Cincinnati, 6 o'clock Eastern on ESPN+. Who do you like in this one, TCU or Cincinnati?
Yeah, I think Cincinnati's a team that's flown under the radar a little bit this season, but I like TCU's passing game to get the job done. Josh Hoover, one of the most exciting young quarterbacks in the conference, and a final parting shot for Jack Beck as well at wide receiver, so I think that they're able to take care of business.
Yeah, I like TCU as well. Cincinnati just can't score right now.
Frogs for me as well. Moving right along, Houston versus BYU. This is going to be a fun one. A lot up in the air for this one for BYU. 10:15 Eastern kickoff. At night, I should say. Wake up for that one. On ESPN, who do you like in this one?
Yeah, I don't love that I have to wait until like 2 a.m. to figure out who's going to be playing in the Big 12 title game. But I do like BYU in this game. Obviously, Houston just fired their offensive coordinator, and I don't think they're going to be able to generate enough points to win this game.
Yeah, can't go any other direction but the Cougs in this one.
Cougars for me as well.
BYU Cougars, by the way.
Yeah, BYU. Let's keep that clear. Finally, our game of the week that's presented by Children's Health. This is going to be such a good game. Kansas State versus Iowa State. A lot on the line in this one when we're talking about who's playing on December 7th in Arlington. 7:30 kickoff on Fox. Who you taking in this one?
Such a tough one to try to project. It's really been kind of a tale of two Avery Johnsons for Kansas State, which is to be expected for a first-year young starting quarterback. I think that Iowa State, though, is the more complete team heading into this matchup. I love what they've got at receiver. Of course, Jaden Higgins, Jalen Noel, one of the best receiver combos in the Big 12. I think that they've grown in the running game, and I expect that their defense, they've dealt with injuries all year long, but I think they're going to be up for this game. So I am going to take Iowa State, and I'm not going to feel good about it.
Yeah, I don't feel great about Kansas State either, but that's who I'm riding with. I love DJ Giddens, and Avery Johnson is back to what got him here.
I went back and forth as well, but I'm taking Iowa State in this one. A lot of games that we had to pick there. Sean, thank you so much for joining us. Real quick, where can fans read your work?
Yeah, you can follow me on all social media platforms at Shahan Jayaraja. Read my work over at cbssports.com, and make sure to check out my podcast, The College Football Survivor Show.
All right. Thanks so much for joining us. Have a great week of college football.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, we hope you enjoy what is sure to be a wild final week of the regular season football here in the Big 12. A lot on the line for that championship game. Tune in next week as we're going to bring you an hour-long championship game preview. You are not going to want to miss that one. For Pete Sousa, I'm Madison Hock. We'll see you next time on Inside the 12.